So he came back very quickly, and I was positive, and at first I was really blasé about it, but within a couple of days I was bedridden. They took me to a COVID ward, all the medical staff in hazmat suits. It looked like I was in a nuclear power plant, to be honest. And at that point, the consultant phoned Glenn and said, prepare for Michael's end of life. I found myself in a number of dream worlds. I hesitate to call them dreams because they were really real and vivid, and in most of them I was being held captive.
Welcome to Tommyfield Live, a chance to meet. Let's join the audience now, live from our radio theatre stage.
Hello again, and welcome to another live Saturday, a chance to meet, here on Oldham Community Radio, 99.7 FM. I'm your host, Graydon Monk, and joining me on the radio theatre stage today, please welcome our guest, Mike Gill. Welcome, Mike. Mike has had he's got an incredible and traumatic story to tell. He tested positive for COVID-19 and he went on a fairly rapid downhill journey into very dangerous waters indeed. Thankfully, Mike survived and speaks to us today about his many difficulties and the effect that this illness has had on himself and his family. Mike has also published a book about his experiences, which we'll talk about later, and in between the chatting we'll be playing some songs chosen by Mike, but more about all that later. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Graham.
Before we go on this journey with you, can you briefly tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, education, family, career, etc.?
Sure. I was born in Middleton, just down the road. Of course, I've now moved up in the world and live in Chadderton in Oldham. So I've got away from that background a bit. I was born on the edge of Middleton, so I was on the edge of the countryside and the town in the times when we had mills. I had the best of both worlds with the countryside fresh air and the fog of the town from the mill chimneys. I went to Chadderton Grammar School for boys, and later in life I went to Northern College full-time with a mature student there, then to university in Bradford to do history and politics. Did postgrads in management at Salford and Huddersfield, and teaching qualification at Huddersfield Uni.
I notice you do a particularly worthwhile job at the moment, as well as being an author. You've got a couple of strings to your bow. You've got a couple of strings to your bow at the moment, as well as being an author. You do a very, very worthwhile job with people, ex-offenders or people like that.
Yeah, I've done that kind of thing. I'm having to pull back on that now because it's becoming one of the problems of long COVID is that you can lose your energies, you can lose your focus on things, and at the moment I'm finding it very, very difficult to continue to work.
Yeah,
that's one of the things, and for me, you've got to pick the battles that you're going to fight, and if you're losing one, withdraw.
Yeah,
and so
I understand that. And we're now going to move on to the issue of COVID, which was an extremely serious issue for yourself.
Yeah.
When and how did you first realise that you had COVID?
Well, first, my wife, Glenn, she tested positive right at the very beginning of January last year. And she urged me, when I say urged, told me that I had to go and be tested. And so I got tested, came back positive the next day. I thought, oh well, fair enough. It's a few days more holiday for Christmas.
So this was a PCR type of test, was it?
It was at one of those
testing station. Yeah.
So it came back very quickly, and I was positive, and at first I was really blasé about it, but within a couple of days I was bedridden, and Glenn was having to look after me and herself at the time, and I could hardly move from bed, and I just went down downhill so rapidly at that point. I was virtually delirious.
What were your symptoms at that time? What did you feel like at that time?
The symptoms were, well, one, absolute exhaustion. I could hardly breathe, and I was losing my marbles.
Right.
Yeah, I was getting quite delirious at times.
So you couldn't even get out of bed to walk around or anything like that very much?
Walking as far as the toilet, just a couple of meters, was a strenuous effort. Glenn thought I was being a bit mad, I think. She was putting it on, sort of thing, because every time I'm walking to the room, and she's, man flu.
Well, we always do get it worse, don't we?
But she did look after me, and it was a struggle for her to do that.
Yeah, of course, she'd got COVID as well while she was trying to look after you.
She had COVID as well, and she was looking after me. And the ambulance came a couple of times, the paramedics came a couple of times. The first time they decided not to take me. Glenn was really worried about that. 2 days later she phoned again. This time they did take me, and my last memories of her at that point was one of them was taking me out the front door. I looked into the living room, and she was being examined by the other paramedic.
Wow.
So she was really in quite a state at that time. And I couldn't really notice it whilst I was up, because I was really out of it. But nonetheless, I was still, I'll be all right at that point.
So when they didn't take you the first time, what were their excuse for you not being bad enough to go in the first time then?
It's funny, you trust the medical profession at all levels. And I suppose I wanted to believe that I was fine. And they did phone a GP. They didn't just make that decision.
So they took advice then? Yeah.
They phoned a GP, and the GP advised them that I should be okay, and presumably they'd done lots of readings, because he came into the bedroom with that many machines. You wondered how they could carry them up and down the stairs.
Wow. Well, on the second time, I believe, when you went in, that was the 12th of January. So what happened then when you arrived at hospital?
That seemed like a matter of moments that they made that decision. And they wheeled me down to the ambulance, which was about 100 or so meters away from the house. They got me into the hospital, and it was a whirlwind of blurred images of first I'm in a cubicle, then I'm on a corridor. I'm on a bed on a corridor, other people.
So you were in A&E at that time, were you?
I was in the A&E.
Yeah.
Then they wheeled me to another cubicle, and I'm watching a workstation with all nurses and doctors to and froing. And a doctor came to me and told me that they were going to move me into the ICU. And the impact on me, to be told that, was quite negligible. I was fair enough. So I was thinking in my head, fair enough, ICU, I'll be all right there.
Well, you think it was the best place for you, probably, wouldn't you, if you were feeling so rough?
Yeah, and I think that the lack of oxygen to the brain at that time was making it that I wasn't necessarily as focused as I could be. It was a problem for me not taking things in. But they didn't actually take me to an ICU ward. They took me to a COVID ward, just 4 beds. Just 4 beds in that, and all the medical staff in hazmat suits. It looked like I was in a nuclear power plant, to be honest. It was really strange.
So the beds would be quite spread out, would they, in between the beds?
Out.
Yeah.
Where there should have been 6 beds, you could see the ward would cater for 6, but it was actually 4. And you never talked to any of the patients. You never got to know them, other than by what you heard them say on the phone or say to doctors, and them with you. Never talked to anyone else. Would have killed me, ma'am.
So they'd got you into ward, I think it was F7.
F7.
And that was a COVID specialist ward.
Yeah.
How did they start treating you then when you were in there with what?
I was on a CPAP mask all day, 24 hours a day. I was masked up, and they pumping oxygen into me. They're feeding me on steroids and all sorts of other drugs that I couldn't possibly remember. And I'm being visited frequently during the day by doctors. Doctors are telling me that I'm getting worse and not better. And I'm taking it and I'm saying, you got to tell me straight everything on this, because everyone outside had to know the truth about what COVID could do, because everyone was still dismissing it as just another form of flu, and clearly it wasn't. It was very damaging, so it's important to me that everyone knew exactly what the score was.
And you started to go downhill from there.
It was downhill. It was downhill from that point. Well, it was downhill from beginning of January, but from that point it was getting worse, and the odds on living were getting worse and worse, probably by the day.
Okay, well, we're just going to take a break from it at the moment, because I know it's quite emotional for you, and some of the family are here as well, because you've chosen some music to go in between these conversations. And the first track is by the splendidly titled Guru's Jazzmatazz.
Yep.
Who are they, and what does this track mean to you?
Well, Guru was originally the vocalist with a hip-hop band called Gangstar, and my kids introduced me to hip-hop in the 90s, and I loved the way that they used the beats. I loved the way that they used the vocals for urban poetry. I loved the whole thing about it. And this track is accompanied by Isaac Hayes. My eldest boy and I went to see both Isaac Hayes and Guru at a festival, and it was such a beautiful day, but they were on separate stages. And Guru's Jazzmatazz is a collaboration of lots and lots of musicians. Came out of that, having seen both those bands just bursting to buy an album by Guru. So I bought his first two. Kay, my eldest boy, bought me the album that this is from, my birthday time. And so that combination of Guru and Isaac Hayes, just brilliant for me.
Right, so this obviously means a lot to you, this track. So here is Night Vision by Guru's Jazzmatazz. Welcome back to the Oldham Community Radio Theatre stage, and today's Tommyfield Live, a chance to meet. We are here with our live guest, COVID survivor, Mike Gill, who before the break was telling us how he contracted COVID, who went through A&E, into the COVID ward, and then went on a downhill journey in ward F7. So you weren't very well at this time.
Not at all, no. And things were going to get worse. After I'd been on that ward for a couple of weeks, and I'd witnessed at least one fellow patient die, and things were getting to be quite bad. I wasn't responding to treatment. It was getting worse, and they decided to move me to the ICU. And the day that they moved me, I think I was losing it mentally and beginning to hallucinate a little when they took me to the ICU. What I saw when they rolled my bed in there was not what the ICU actually was, but looked like something from a Victorian hospital in my head, only with purple walls, which obviously doesn't represent an ICU in a modern hospital. And the next day, after they wheeled me down there, they allowed visitors. They allowed my wife, Glenn, her granddaughter, Chanel, and my sons, Keir and Liam, to come and see me. I'm not sure that I quite understood why at the time, even though they'd already told me that my odds now had decreased to 2 to 1 against surviving. And it was a wonderful experience to see them. They came in twos, all gowned up, hazmats and all that sort of thing. And they all held my hand for as long as I could take it, but I was exhausted very quickly. And then they left. And that's the last I remember before waking up. I don't remember the coma being induced or anything like that. And for the next few weeks, nearly 4 weeks, over 3 weeks, I was in a coma. And Glenn and Keir had to communicate everything to the family and friends and everything. So they were getting news. Within a day, I'm rapidly declining. The oxygen that I required them to supply got up to 90% within a matter of days. And at that point, the consultant phoned Glenn and said, prepare for Michael's end of life.
Wow.
And it was, for me, I'm out of it, but my feet are turning purple. My health is going down. They don't know whether I've got clots on my lungs, on my legs. And Glenn gets that kind of news, and my family wouldn't have it and said, no, he's not going to have that. He will not accept dying. And apparently, even though I couldn't make that choice myself, I didn't. The next day, the oxygen that they were providing had gone down to 75%. Started going down, the graph was going down, which is good, the graph's going down. Then all of a sudden it shoots up to 75 again. No notice. So as people are getting optimistic, it all changed again. Then it started going down again. Oh no, Michael's got pneumonia now. So when you look at a roller coaster, the graph that I put in the book that shows what that oxygen level was like represents that roller coaster. It was the big one at Blackpool.
And to be told by the staff, like your wife Glenn was, that to prepare for your death, that must be absolutely horrendous thing to hear when you realise you're so involved with it, but you're so detached because she couldn't even come to see you during that time, other than just before you were put in the coma. And they probably invited the family then because the odds were so stacked against you.
I think that's one of the things that for all the people that went through COVID and going through it in a lockdown period, not being able to see and touch the loved ones when they're in that situation. At the same time, and despite the lockdown being in place, it did bring my family much closer together. Everyone was so supportive of each other. And Glenn and Keir, they would begin all the conversations to everyone. It was like news at 10, all out in one go. And they would begin all the conversations with Mike's blood oxygen is at, whatever. They would give the stats. And Glenn kept a diary of all these things, and it took me several weeks after leaving hospital to be able to read it. It was heartbreaking. I've included everything that she wrote during the coma days in the book. So it's exactly as she had it and how she communicated to Keir, and then from there Keir communicated it on.
One of the incidents I liked in the book was when you met the hospital visitor called Rob. That had come to actually visit someone else. And just before we go into the next music, perhaps if you wouldn't mind telling us a bit about that. Rob,
my guardian angel, I think. It was interesting because when I was on F7, you only got to know about anyone else by them talking to the hospital staff. And Rob came on. There were nurses and there were these medical support people, and Rob was one of them. And he was a young man, and I never saw him really talk to anyone or actually do much other than wander around. And he came and he stood at the bottom of this bed of this woman that I mentioned before had died. And I learned so much about listening to her, talking to him. I don't remember him talking to her, just listening to her. And it must have been a great salvation for her, for this to have happened. And then one day, Rob and another of the hospital support staff, Kevin he was called, came to me, and the curtains were drawn around her bed. And he said she died, and I was visibly upset. He said they'd close the curtains because she was dead, and they were going to close our curtains and the rest of the ward when they've moved her out to avoid distress. Anyway, Rob stayed with me for 10 minutes, holding my hand, just listening to me as I was upset. Don't remember him after that. Anyway, a few months later, I'm in a general ward. I've been through the ICU. I survived. I was a bit of a celebrity survivor in the hospital, and people from F7 came down to see me. Yeah. You know, another one didn't bite the dust. And so this one, Michael, that I'd remembered, he came to see me. He said, "Who do you remember?" I said, "Well, it's difficult because everyone was hazmated up and you can't remember everyone." I said, "I remember Rob." He said, "Who's Rob?" I said, "Rob, one of the support staff." There's no one called Rob. Never had anyone called Rob work on that ward. So my guardian angel, or maybe the other lady's guardian angel, that stayed and did a little bit of overtime before leaving this mortal coil.
Wow, what a fantastic story. We can pause now. I think it's an opportune time to pause and go on to your next track that you've chosen. This guy is a blues legend, Buddy Guy. Why did you choose this track?
Buddy Guy, yeah. Well, as you say, a blues legend, yeah. And Glenn and I have done a lot of road trips in America, and three of them have started off from Chicago, two of them being Route 66. On this one, we were doing a trip from Chicago to Florida, about 3,000 miles trip we were doing, and we started off at a hotel in the center of Chicago. We decided to take a walk, acclimatise to the time and what have you. Went to a bar, got something to drink. Walking back to the hotel, I see this club, Buddy Guy's Legends. And I said, "We're going there tomorrow." Glenn wasn't familiar with Buddy Guy, but we went in and we watched the band, and Buddy Guy himself came and performed with the band. It was weird. He got this huge guy in more ways than one.
He's such a great player as well.
Tall, a legend in the club. Has all these guitars around the wall, all autographed by the likes of Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and what have you. The guy is well loved in the world of blues and guitar players.
So you were able to meet him?
And yes, we did. We went to meet him, bought a CD, which he signed. Glenn, who'd never heard of him, pushed me into the background whilst the photos were taken.
What a minx.
So we've got 6'6" Buddy Guy and a little under 5 foot Glenn pushing me into the background. One of my heroes standing there, and they're both pushing me out and hugging each other.
She wanted some attention there for sure.
It's so wonderful. Buddy Guy is a legend, and we were at Legends, and we went again a couple of years later. So yeah, fantastic.
So we're going to feature this track. The track is called "Ain't No Sunshine," and it's by Buddy Guy and Tracy Chapman. That was Buddy Guy and Tracy Chapman with "Ain't No Sunshine." You're listening to Tommyfield Live, a chance to meet with our guest Mike Gill. Before that track, Mike was talking about being in induced coma through COVID, and he wasn't very well at all. So can you kind of pick it up from there, Mike?
Yeah, for me, when I started coming out of the coma, when they started reducing the anaesthetics and all the various drugs that kept me paralysed, I found myself in a number of dream worlds. I hesitate to call them dreams because they were really real and vivid and became memories, some of which took a long time to distinguish from real memories. Very real worlds that I was in. And in most of them I was being held captive in some way. So in the first one I remember I was held in a sort of a swimming bath and having to pedal this huge water wheel which turned out to be full of the sewage of a hotel which would flush out every now and again. And I'd be trapped in this swimming bath full of human waste. And then it moved on, but I was moving through a number of places where I was being held captive until they started to merge with where I actually was in the hospital ward, in a ICU pod. But I felt, although some of the people that were on my side in terms of the doctors and nurses and everything, they were for me, I didn't know that. I was paranoid, I was delusional. And I believed that I was being held captive for some terrible experiment. And that experiment that I was being held for, I was being held captive in Dewsbury, of all places. I believed I'd been held captive in Dewsbury, but I'd been caught on the south coast. I'd been trapped on the south coast because I'd just come back from America, apparently doing another road trip in my head. And I was going up the east coast in a silver Maserati. And I'd booked this soul star, this aging soul star that was doing a Vegas-like concert, to do a concert, special concert for my lovely wife Glenn. And I'd booked them to perform in a hotel on the south coast. And I was watching this performance, I was going to watch this performance, but I'd also engaged an aging soap star, silver-haired charmer from Dallas or something, to escort her to this concert that I'd romantically booked. And he was wearing a satin suit in humbug colours with a top hat. And he was about 10 feet tall, obviously on stilts, walking her to this place. And I was watching this from the decks of the Royal Yacht Britannia, which at this point was a car transporter. And
bizarre.
It was real to me. This was real.
It must have happened to someone.
It must. It took me a long time to lose that, to say, no, that couldn't have been real, Mike. that definitely wasn't real. Anyway, I got captured at this point as Glenn was being escorted to this do, and I ended up in this lab in Dewsbury where they were doing experiments on me. And they weren't feeding me, they weren't giving me anything to drink, but somehow I was surviving. And this was the first dream world where there were nights and days. So I think I was coming out of the coma.
And of course, in true life, you were nil by mouth at that time.
I was nil by mouth.
For many weeks, were you?
Anyway, I devised some escape plans, and the first one was that given that I had all these people around me in my head in white coats doing their experiments, having the clipboards and everything, I devised a plan of how I was going to escape. And it was when they weren't looking, I was being held down by a big pile of sheets on my feet. And what I was going to do was remove the sheets one at a time. And of course they wouldn't notice this because I was doing it discreetly and dropping them out on the floor where they wouldn't see the one pile getting smaller and another pile getting taller. They weren't going to see that, so I was going to then roll off. When they weren't looking and I had all these sheets off, I was going to roll off the bed, off this hospital bed. I was in a surgical gown, and I was going to crawl out with my backside showing into the winter streets of Dewsbury and claim asylum.
Brilliant.
Anyway, because I couldn't actually lift, I didn't have the strength to lift the first sheet off, I had to go to plan B, which was that surely my kids would notice I was gone. And you didn't, did you? So didn't notice I was gone, and then they would come with some police or something to rescue me from Dewsbury. They were bound to find me there. That plan didn't work.
How the bizarre things that happen in people's minds.
It's real to me. It's still real to me.
Yeah.
I feel betrayed.
We're going to move on to another music track now, and this one is by a band called Toots and the Maytals, which is a band I've always liked, I must admit. And why did you choose this song?
Well, there's that much reggae that I love, but nearly everything I've got is on vinyl with the reggae. And this one has a certain Toots in his style. It was everything that I loved about reggae. It was fun. It was buoyant. It was upbeat. It was dance to. You can't not tap your feet to Toots. But at the same time, Toots was an early tragedy of COVID.
He was, yeah. He passed away, didn't he?
And he died in the autumn of 2020. Was in an induced coma. And so it has both the joy of the reggae and the poignancy of his death.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, it was fantastic live. I remember seeing Bob Marley and Toots Hibbert, and Toots was the better of the two. Yeah. So that says something. This track is called 5446 Was My Number by Toots and the Maytals.
And the alert.
Hello. Welcome back to Oldham Community Radio Theatre Stage, and today's Tommyfield Live, A Chance to Meet. We're here with our live guest, COVID survivor Mike Gill, who before the break had talked to us about being at the brink of death and then recovery, starting his recovery, coming back out of his induced coma and suffering from delusion and paranoia in a journey through a bizarre world. But I'm assuming that was the beginning of the recovery for you.
It was. I think that once I started to get a little bit more contact with my mind, I was able to start moving forward. And at first it was very, very difficult because I was wholly dependent upon the hospital staff for everything. I had no muscles. My legs wouldn't work. I had no voice because I had a tracheotomy in. I could hardly lift my hands. Communicating was very, very difficult. And spending a long time on your back, being wholly dependent on everyone else, is a difficult place to be. But you start thinking. Well, there was at one point I was laying my back and I said, "Mate, you're becoming a moron. You've got to start thinking. You've got to start doing. You've got to start doing a physical task every day that you've not done before. And you've got to start reading because I could hardly pick up a book. I had no concentration. But Glenn had sent in 3 books for me, and they were like lifting weights for me. But I started. And it was step by step, a little bit at a time. There's a lot of difficulty around that. First started to read, I couldn't really concentrate. I would read a paragraph, have to read it again. So it took a long time, but that kind of discipline. The physical stuff, I had physios coming in every day whilst I'm on my back in the hospital. And pushing me that little bit further. Some of it was very, very disconcerting and would induce a panic. Like sitting up, getting to sit up, and couldn't sit up without help. There was no way they could do that. It took a long time before I could actually sit up under my own steam. And when I did sit up with the help of physios, I would go into a panic because it was like all the oxygen and all the blood left my head in one go, and my lungs wouldn't work properly. I'd be disorientated, I'd be lie me down. And the same for when I first stood up. So for those first few weeks, whilst I was still on the ICU and 1 week in a general ward, moving from being wholly dependent on people to just before I could leave there, I was shaving for the first time myself. It had previously been done by nurses. Little things like that were big steps to take. Being able to move myself up the bed, take control of the bed, and learn to sit up under my own steam. I used to have to pull myself up using the side bars of the bed, and that kind of thing. Whatever you could do, and I would exercise myself every day. I'd have physio things to go through, and every 2 hours I would do these physio exercises. I'd never really been, well, when I was younger I did a lot of exercise. As I got older I got lazy, and then I became obsessed by it, and I still do it every morning, get up, go through an exercise routine.
Well, they got you fit enough to come out of hospital with all this regime, and you went into rehabilitation at the Butler Green Centre. How did you find that?
That was one of the most brilliant things in my life. The way that I saw it was that the hospital saved my life, the ICU saved my life, and Butler Green literally got me back on my feet. When I first went into Butler Green, I'd stood up once before going into Butler Green, and that was disconcerting. They got me in Butler Green. I got my own room, which was fantastic because this was the first time I actually slept properly. You know, all the beeping, banging noises, people in wards and everything. And going to Butler Green, the first day the physio said, let's test you out. And he had me walk using a frame, using a Zimmer frame. What must have been about 2 meters from my bed to the sink in my room. And it was exhausting and exhilarating at the same time. It got me walking just that far. And then he told me what they were going to do with me in the gym. And I'm, oh my God. I'm both excited about it and scared to death of it. Am I going to fail? Am I going to be able to do it?
How long had you been in hospital or rehab in total by that time?
I've been in hospital for over 2 months.
Yeah.
I've been bedridden for another 2 weeks on top of that. So
you'd lost all control of everything virtually?
It'd been about 3 months since I'd walked under my own steam properly.
Yeah.
And so I had a little frame in my room, but I didn't get to use that much, just very little to help me get at first from the bed to the wheelchair. I was only taking 1 or 2 steps. And then they wheeled me out to the gym, to the parallel bars, and they showed me these stairs I was going to be climbing in a week, they said. And I messaged my older brother Anthony, who sat there, messaged him to say, I'm going to do that in a week. He said, you'll do it. But I said, I'm not sure I'm sort of committed to this one. Anyway, they had me go up and down the parallel bars and lift dumbbells. And every time I got out of my wheelchair to get to the bars, I had to push myself up, and still didn't have a proper voice. It was very much a grunt, and I would go up, you know, and I'd force myself up, and I'd grab the parallel bars, and I'd shuffle down. And they were doing, you know, all these exercises, and every day I went back, and it was wonderful. I so loved it. I laughed at the end of it every session with it, and every little thing was a massive achievement. They'd give me these exercises to do and say, right, do 20, like being in the army. Do 20, Gill, do it now.
So they,
went like that,
they got you
did a
fit
lot.
enough, just about fit enough to go home.
They did.
Then. Now, I know we've had to rush this along
Yeah.
because we have to keep within timescales, but Mike has written a book about his experience, which he's got with him today, Touch and Go, surviving COVID.
Yeah, touch and go.
Anyone listening, you can buy this on Amazon. Other bookshops are available, of course. And if you're in the audience here, Mike may even sign you a copy today, if you wish. You want to tell people about the book and maybe about what effect this had on your family as well, rather than just you.
Yeah, the book was part of my own rehabilitation because I needed to. It was cathartic in writing about it, but I wanted also to say something about how it impacted on the family, how the illness impacts on greater than the individual. Because you are one part of that story. You're like the pebble that causes the ripples, but you got all those ripples emanating from it. Writing the book was a massive discipline because I had to also go through things like all the text from brothers to sons and sons to everyone else, and it was difficult to read. I had to read Glenn's diary from start to finish, and there was a lot of tears around that, doing that. But it was part of the whole, and I would go to my little office at home, and I would write at first half an hour a day. I'd build it up and build it up and build it up till I got to 3 hours or so, or 1,000 words. I would set myself those targets to do. So it was therapeutic, cathartic, and helpful, and I think tells a story that is common to a lot of people.
Well, I've read it and it's a fantastic book. And one thing I took from that book was that we should all realise more how loved we are as people, and how much we love other people and our family members. Most of us often don't say it often enough, but I think this brought it home to you, didn't it?
I think it did, for family and friends across the world. Catholics, Protestants, Hindus, Muslims, Buddhists chanting for me across the world, America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, family and friends that far and wide were doing that, and knowing, and it made me realise how much I loved so many people as well, and I don't let it pass. It might sound a bit soppy sometimes, but people that I love know about it. I tell them. I can't shut up telling my wife, but telling her how much I love her, but knowing how much you're loved as well, how much you mean.
Well, unfortunately, we're at the end of our time now, so I'd like you all to join me in thanking Mike Gill. Thank you very much, Mike.